My mother handed me a black apron in the service hallway of the Fairmont House wedding venue and said, "Emma, don't make this awkward. You're better behind the scenes anyway." She said it with a smile, like she was asking for a small favor instead of erasing me from my own sister's wedding weekend. Behind her, my sister Brianna stood in a white satin robe with pearl buttons, watching me like she already knew I would give in. I had paid $41,800 toward that wedding. I paid the venue deposit, the catering retainer, the flowers, the photographer's second shooter, and the private bridal suite Brianna cried about wanting because, according to her, this is the only wedding I'll ever have. And now, 40 minutes before her rehearsal dinner, they wanted me to tie on an apron and carry trays so Carter's family would not know who had actually paid for the room they were standing in. I looked at the apron, then at my father, who was pretending to read something very important on his phone. Robert Whitaker had always been good at vanishing during the cruel part. My mother would deliver the insult, Brianna would play wounded if I reacted, and Dad would step in afterward with that tired voice that made me feel guilty for having feelings. "It's just for tonight, he said without looking up. "Don't turn this into a whole thing." That was how my family handled every wound they gave me. They cut first, then accused me of making a scene because I noticed the blood. Before I go further, if you have ever been expected to pay for everyone while being treated like nobody, you will understand why I stayed calm in that hallway. I was 29 years old, an event operations manager in Atlanta, and I handled rich people's disasters for a living. I knew contracts, vendors, deposits, seating charts, drunk relatives, missing invoices, and mothers of the bride who thought crying counted as payment. My family thought my silence meant I could still be trained. They forgot that silence was also how I listened, how I documented, and how I let people expose exactly who they were. Brianna stepped closer and lowered her voice, just enough to pretend she was being kind. "Emma, please don't embarrass me tonight. Carter's family is very traditional. Mom thought helping the staff would give you something useful to do." She touched my arm with 2 fingers, like she was afraid my disappointment might stain her manicure. I asked, "Where is my seat?" Her smile tightened. My mother sighed. "Sweetheart, the family table is full. Carter's aunt flew in from Charleston at the last minute, and we had to adjust. There's a vendor meal in the back. Chicken or pasta, I think." She said it like she was offering me a gift. "You don't like attention anyway, photographers." That was when I saw the seating chart leaning against the wall near the florist buckets. Cream linen paper, gold calligraphy, exactly the kind of thing Brianna once called timeless after rejecting the cheaper acrylic sign I had already approved. Table 1 had my parents, Carter's parents, Brianna, Carter, 2 aunts, a grandmother, and a couple I barely knew. Table 2 had the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Table 3 had cousins. My name was nowhere. At the bottom corner, on a yellow sticky note in Brianna's handwriting, were the words, "Emma, kitchen, ven if needed." She had even drawn a little heart beside it. For a second, something old rose in my chest. Not shock. I had run out of shock years ago. It was recognition. I remembered paying for Brianna's college application fees because Mom said Dad was short that month. I remembered skipping my own graduation dinner because Brianna had a hard week and needed the family's attention. I remembered every time my parents called me practical when they meant useful, mature when they meant easy to disappoint, and strong when they meant safe to hurt. This was not a new role. They had just finally put it in writing. My mother pushed the apron toward me again. Emma, guests are arriving. Brianna's eyes flicked toward the dining room. Please, just act like family for once. I almost laughed at that. In my family, acting like family meant I paid the invoice, fixed the problem, swallowed the insult, and disappeared before anyone had to thank me. I took the apron from my mother's hand. Brianna relaxed immediately. My father exhaled. My mother smiled like she had restored order. Good girl, she said. And that was the moment I decided I would not save them from themselves. And what none of them knew was that I had not paid for the wedding as some desperate older sister trying to be loved. I had paid through Whitaker Event Solutions, LLC, the small event consulting company I created 3 years earlier. The master contract with Fairmont House did not list my mother as a client. It did not list my father. It did not list Brianna, no matter how many times she called herself the bride in vendor emails. The contract listed one authorized signer, Emma Claire Whitaker. My family never asked how I handled the wedding. They only asked whether I had handled it. They never read the clauses. They never checked the payment ledger. They never understood that in events, the person who pays is not always the person with power, but the person named on the contract usually is. I tied the apron slowly and walked into the magnolia room, carrying a tray of champagne I had paid for. The room was beautiful in that expensive southern way Brianna had always wanted: white walls, blue silk drapes, polished floors, candles floating in glass cylinders, and long tables dressed like nobody there had ever worried about a bill. Carter's family gathered near the fireplace. My parents stood beside them, laughing too loudly. I heard my father tell Carter's uncle, "Weddings are expensive, but you only get one first daughter married." First daughter. I stood 10 feet away, holding drinks, and he erased me so smoothly, no one even noticed. Brianna took the microphone 20 minutes later. "I just want to thank Mom and Dad," she said, glowing under the chandelier, "for making this whole weekend possible." Everyone clapped. My mother put a hand over her heart. My father nodded humbly, like a man accepting credit for a building he had never touched. Then Brianna looked toward me, and her smile sharpened. "And thank you to my sister Emma, who is helping the staff tonight because she knows how much this means to me." A few people turned. One bridesmaid gave a tiny, awkward clap and stopped. Carter looked confused. His mother, Patricia, glanced from my apron to my face, then back to Brianna. Nobody knew what to say, which was fitting, because my family had spent years depending on my silence. My phone buzzed in the apron pocket. Me. I stepped back toward the service hall and opened the email. It was from Fairmont House, billing. Final weekend balance, urgent authorization needed. I expected the remaining balance to be around $18,600. The number on the screen was $34,440. Under pending charges were upgrades I had never approved: champagne wall, imported orchid installation, raw bar extension, late-night truffle sliders, premium bridal suite conversion, and after-party lounge reset. At the bottom was a note: approved per client email. B. Whitaker coordinating. My sister had not just hidden me in the kitchen. She had been spending under my contract and planning for me to find out when it was too late to say no. I felt my pulse hit once, hard, then settle. I opened the contract folder on my phone. Section 4.2 said, No material upgrade was valid without written authorization from the client of record. Section 7.1 listed Whitaker Event Solutions LLC, authorized signer Emma Claire Whitaker. Section 8.4 gave the venue the right to suspend unapproved services pending verification. I knew those clauses because I had requested them. My family thought they had trapped me with embarrassment. They had actually handed me the first clean piece of leverage. A woman in a dove gray blazer turned the corner and stopped dead. Marcy Bennett, the senior planner, looked at my face, then at the black apron, then at the tray in my hand. "Emma," she said, "why are you dressed like catering staff?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared behind her, smiling too hard. "Marcy, there you are. Emma's just pitching in. She likes to be useful." Photographers. The Marcy did not smile back. She looked down at her tablet, then turned it so the screen faced my mother. "Mrs. Whitaker, Emma is not listed as a volunteer. She is listed as the authorized client." The hallway went quiet. Brianna appeared behind my mother, still holding the microphone. Photographers. Carter followed her. So did my father and Patricia, drawn by that special instinct families have when a secret starts making noise. On Marcy's tablet, plain as daylight, was the contract header, Whitaker Event Solutions LLC, client of record, Emma Claire Whitaker, authorized signer. Brianna's face went pale beneath her bridal makeup. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. Effortless, staying at the screen like it had betrayed him personally. Marcy looked at me, then at the apron, and asked, "Emma, why is the person who owns this contract serving food in the hallway?" I untied the apron, folded it once, and placed it on the silver prep table beside the champagne. Marcy's question stayed in the hallway like a glass had broken, and nobody wanted to be the first to look down. My mother's face shifted through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, irritation, then the bright artificial smile she used whenever she needed strangers to believe we were a normal family. "Authorized client is just a paperwork thing," she said lightly. "Emma helped us set things up because she works in events. Brianna is the bride, of course." Marcy's eyes moved to me, not my mother. That was the first small correction of the night. For once, someone in the room understood exactly where the authority sat. I kept my hands folded in front of me and said, "Marcy, can we step into your office for a minute? I need to review the final balance before anything else is served." Brianna's mouth opened. "Emma, seriously, right now." She glanced back toward the Magnolia Room, where guests were still murmuring after her little microphone announcement. "You're going to make this about money in the middle of my rehearsal dinner." I looked at her satin robe, her pearl earrings, the hairstylist touching up a curl near her cheek, and thought about the vendor meal she had assigned me in the kitchen. "No," I said calmly. "You made it about money when you approved charges under my contract without my authorization." Carter's mother, Patricia, went very still. Carter looked at Brianna. My father finally found his voice. "Emma, don't start throwing accusations around. This is your sister's wedding weekend." I nodded. "Then it should be very easy to explain why the balance is almost $16,000 higher than the number I approved." That number changed the air. People who had been pretending not to listen stopped pretending. Brianna's maid of honor, a woman named Sloane who had spent the whole evening photographing herself near flower arrangements I paid for, lowered her phone. Carter's father stepped closer. Patricia said, 16,000. She did not say it loudly, but she said it like a woman who had served on enough charity boards to know when a budget was being buried under manners. My mother's smile twitched. Weddings have last-minute expenses. Marcy looked at her tablet. They do, but material upgrades require written approval from the client of record. My mother laughed once, too sharp. And Emma gave it, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. I did not argue in the hallway. That was another thing my family never understood about me. I was not afraid of confrontation. I simply preferred to have documents in front of me when it happened. Marcy led us to a small planning office off the service corridor, with 2 upholstered chairs, a printer, a corkboard full of floor plans, and a desk that looked like it had survived 100 brides. My mother tried to come in first. Marcy stepped aside and let me enter before her. It was a tiny thing, almost invisible, but my mother noticed. She had spent 29 years making sure rooms arranged themselves around Brianna. Watching a stranger arrange one around me made her jaw tighten. Inside the office, Marcy pulled up the account. The original estimate was clean venue package, seated dinner for 96, standard floral, string quartet, photography, bridal suite, ceremony chairs, basic bar, and staff gratuity. I had approved it down to the linen color. Then the screen shifted to the pending weekend charges. Champagne wall, imported orchids, raw bar extension, after-party lounge reset, premium suite conversion, extra valet, additional uplighting, custom monogrammed cocktail napkins. Each item had a small notation, bride request, approved by email. Marcy clicked one. The email preview opened, and there it was, a message supposedly from me saying, "Brianna has my approval for all bride-facing upgrades. Please keep me copied, but don't bother me with every detail." The address looked close to mine at a glance, but not close enough. My real business email ended in whitakereventsolutions.com. This one ended in whitakereventsolutions.com, with the hyphen slipped in like a lie wearing perfume. Marcy saw it at the same moment I did. "That is not the domain on file," she said. Brianna immediately said, "I don't know anything about domains." My mother put a hand on Brianna's shoulder. "It was probably an honest mistake. Emma has so many little business accounts." I looked at my sister. Who created this email? Brianna's eyes filled with tears so quickly, I almost admired the muscle memory. "I was trying to make the wedding beautiful. You kept acting like every dollar was some personal attack. And Mom said you wanted to help, but you get controlling when you feel left out." My father rubbed his forehead. "Emma, come on. You know your sister is emotional. She probably thought she had permission." Patricia's voice cut in from the doorway. "Permission to impersonate a business email?" Nobody answered her. Brianna wiped beneath her eyes carefully so she would not smear her makeup. "I did not impersonate anyone. I coordinated. That's what brides do. Brides choose colors," Marcy said evenly, emotionally. Authorized clients approve charges. My mother turned on Marcy with a smile that had lost all warmth. "With respect, this is a family matter." Marcy did not blink. "With respect, Mrs. Whitaker, it became a venue matter when someone used an unverified email to approve charges on a binding contract. That was the second small correction of the night." My mother was used to turning cruelty into privacy. Marcy turned it back into procedure. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. At first I thought it was a vendor, but then I saw the message preview. "This is Carter. I'm sorry. I didn't know you paid for all this. I looked through the glass panel in the office door. Carter stood in the hallway, staring at his own phone, while Brianna stood beside him, pretending not to panic. I did not respond yet. I could feel Brianna watching me through the glass. She knew Carter was starting to understand, and that scared her more than the invoice. Money could be cried around. Humiliation could be reframed. But a groom realizing his bride had lied to his family 2 days before the wedding was harder to decorate. Marcy printed the email chain, the upgrade list, and the current balance. The printer hummed while my mother whispered to my father near the wall. I caught fragments overreacting. Make her stop. Carter's parents. And after everything we've done. That last phrase made something cold settle in me. After everything we've done was my family's favorite receipt for services never rendered. They used it when they wanted my scholarship refund. They used it when Brianna needed her first apartment deposit. They used it when Mom asked me to cover Dad's dental surgery and then posted online about how grateful she was for a husband who provides. They had done many things, yes. Sterile, they had just confused doing things to me with doing things for me. I turned to Marcy. Can unapproved upgrades be suspended tonight? Marcy nodded. Anything not already consumed can be paused. The raw bar extension, champagne wall, after-party reset, and premium suite conversion can be suspended pending written verification from you. The orchids are already installed in the ceremony foyer, but we can separate that invoice. Brianna made a sound like I had slapped her. You cannot take away my flowers. I looked at her for the first time since we entered the office. I am not taking away your flowers. I am refusing to pay for flowers I did not authorize. It's my wedding, she snapped. There she was. Not the crying bride, not the delicate sister, the real Brianna, furious that the servant had found the contract. And it is my signature, I said. My father stepped between us. Enough, Emma. Your mother and I will talk to you after the dinner. For now, you're going to let this go. We have guests. He used the voice he used when I was 17 and asked why Brianna got the car I helped pay for. Back then, that voice worked. It made me smaller. It made me swallow questions because peace in our house always meant surrender from me. But I was not 17 in my parents' kitchen anymore. I was standing in a venue office with a contract, a fake email, and a balance sheet that had finally given their entitlement numbers. No, I said. We are going to handle it now, before another unauthorized dollar is spent. My mother's eyes narrowed. You would ruin your sister's wedding over money? That was the line she had been waiting to use. It was polished from years of practice. She expected me to flinch. Instead, I picked up the printed upgrade sheet and read the total aloud. $34,440 remaining. Of that, $15,840 appears tied to unapproved upgrades requested through an email address that is not mine. I placed the paper on the desk. This is not about ruining a wedding. This is about stopping fraud before it gets more expensive. Marcy quietly reached for another folder. Emma, there is also an addendum attached to the premium package approval. It has a signature. Brianna froze. Not dramatically, not with tears. Her whole body simply stopped moving. My mother looked at her, and for 1 second, I saw something pass between them that told me my sister had not done this alone. Marcy opened the scanned document on her tablet. At the bottom was my name in a shaky version of my signature, the letters too round, the middle initial wrong, the slant completely different. I stared at it, and strangely, the anger did not come first. What came first was relief. Because there are humiliations families can deny. There are insults they can soften later, stories they can retell until everyone is tired enough to accept the fake version. But a forged signature is not a feeling. It is evidence. Carter stepped into the doorway. His voice was low. "Brianna, did you sign Emma's name?" Brianna turned on him, offended. "Why are you asking me like that?" Patricia appeared behind him, her face pale but controlled. "Because someone did," my father said. "Let's not use words like forged." Marcy closed the folder with careful hands. "Mr. Whitaker, the venue has to use words like forged when a client disputes a signature on a financial addendum." My mother whispered, "This is insane." I looked at the apron folded on the prep table outside the office, then back at my family. "No," I said. "This is what happens when you mistake access for permission." Marcy asked whether I wanted all disputed upgrades suspended immediately. For the first time that evening, everyone waited for my answer. Not Brianna's. Not my mother's. Mine. The power in that pause was quiet, but it was real. I could have canceled everything right then. I could have ended the weekend with one sentence and watched the Magnolia Room empty into a scandal. But I knew my family. If I acted too quickly, they would turn me into the villain before dessert. They would say I was jealous, unstable, bitter, lonely, punishing the bride because I had no life of my own. They had already written that script. I needed them to keep talking long enough to ruin it themselves. So I said, "Suspend only the unverified upgrades. Keep the base rehearsal dinner running. No more charges without my direct written approval. From the domain on file, confirmed by phone with me." Marcy nodded and began typing. Brianna burst into tears, but this time Carter did not move to comfort her. My mother stared at me like she had never seen me before, which was funny because maybe she had not. Maybe she had only ever seen the person who paid, served, absorbed, and disappeared. I picked up the printed addendum and folded it into my purse. At the doorway, Patricia stepped aside to let me pass. As I walked back toward the Magnolia Room, my phone buzzed again with a new email from Fairmont House Security. Subject line: Client identity concern. Internal review initiated. I opened it, read the first line, and stopped cold. The fake email had not been used once. It had been used 12 times. The words used 12 times stayed on my phone screen while the hallway noise faded into a low, distant hum. 12 times meant this was not one panicked bridal upgrade or one careless email sent by a spoiled sister who thought rules were suggestions. 12 times meant someone had created a system. Someone had studied my business email closely enough to imitate it, sent approvals in my name, and trusted that I would be too busy, too guilty, or too publicly humiliated to stop them before the wedding was over. I looked through the open doorway at Brianna, who was now sitting in the planning office with her face in her hands, while my mother rubbed her back like Brianna was the injured party. My father stood near the desk, whispering to Marcy with that low, reasonable tone he used when he wanted women to look unstable beside him. I did not go back into the office right away. I stepped into a quiet corner near the coat closet and opened the security email. Fairmont House had flagged multiple approvals from the fake domain over the previous 6 weeks. Some were small linen upgrades, extra candle rentals, a welcome basket for Carter's parents. Some were not small at all. The premium suite conversion, orchid installation, raw bar extension, and a private brunch for 22 people the morning after the wedding. Every approval used the same language. Emma approved this. Emma said it was fine. Photographers. Emma is busy, but she wants Brianna to have what she asked for. My sister had not just spent under my name. She had learned to speak in my absence. A second email came in from Marcy while I was still reading. Attached was the disputed addendum packet. I opened the PDF and saw the fake signature again. Larger now. Uglier. Whoever signed it had tried to copy the shape of my name but missed the rhythm. My real signature was quick, slanted, almost impatient. This one looked rehearsed. The middle initial was wrong too. Emma C. Whitaker had become Emma Claire W., like someone had practiced from an old birthday card instead of a contract. I took one screenshot, then another. I forwarded everything to my personal attorney, Denise Lowell, with a short message. Potential forged event contract addendum. Please preserve. Then I locked my phone and walked back toward the planning office. By the time I returned, my mother had changed strategies. She was no longer smiling. She was wounded. "I cannot believe you would bring lawyers into your sister's wedding," she said, even though I had not mentioned a lawyer out loud. That told me enough. My father looked at her sharply, and Brianna lifted her face from her hands. "A lawyer?" Carter repeated. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Patricia's eyes moved to me. I saw the calculation there, not cruel, just practical. She was beginning to understand that her family had walked into a wedding weekend built on someone else's money and someone else's lies. I sent the documents to counsel for preservation. I said, "That is not the same as bringing a lawyer into the wedding. The forged signature did that." Brianna stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Stop saying forged! You keep using that word because you want me to look like a criminal." I looked at her for a long second. "Then tell me who signed my name." Her mouth opened, then closed. My mother stepped in. Nobody remembers every little form during wedding planning. Things get hectic. Marcy said, "This was not a little form. It authorized financial changes." My father turned to Marcy. "We understand your position, but this family will handle reimbursement internally." I almost smiled. Internally was where truth went to die in our house. Carter finally faced Brianna fully. "Did you know Emma was paying for the wedding?" Brianna's eyes flashed. Everyone knew Emma was helping. "That is not what I asked." The room went still again. Photographer Zana looked at my mother, and that one glance did more damage than any confession. Carter saw it. Patricia saw it. I saw my father close his eyes for half a second. Brianna whispered, "Mom said Emma wanted to do it quietly because she hates attention." I said, "Mom said that because Mom needed your future in-laws to believe she and Dad were paying." My mother snapped, "You offered." "I offered the original package," I said. "I did not offer to be hidden in the kitchen while you took credit for it." That landed harder than I expected. Carter looked down at the floor. Patricia's lips pressed together. Even Marcy paused. My mother's cheeks colored, but she recovered fast. "You always do this," she said. "You keep a list of everything. Every dollar. Every little sacrifice. Brianna is your sister. A normal sister would want her to feel beautiful." I felt the old hook in that sentence, the one designed to drag me back into childhood, where Brianna's feelings were a public utility and mine were unpaid labor. But this time there was a signed document on the desk and a fake email domain in Fairmont House security logs, and Carter's mother standing there hearing every word. "I wanted her to have a nice wedding," I said. "That is why I paid for the package I approved. What I did not want was to be impersonated." Brianna cried again, but the tears were angrier now. "You make everything sound ugly." "No," I said. "You made it ugly when you wrote my name on a document you knew I had not seen." She stared at me with the same expression she used when we were kids and I refused to give her the last piece of cake. Outrage. Not because I was wrong, but because I had stopped behaving like the world existed to cushion her fall. Marcy cleared her throat. "For tonight, I have suspended the disputed upgrades. The base dinner continues. Tomorrow's ceremony and reception remain active under the original approved package, unless Emma authorizes additional services." My mother turned pale. "Tomorrow? You mean the champagne wall is gone?" Marcy checked her tablet. "Pending verification, yes." Brianna made a small choking sound. "What about the orchids?" "Installed items are being separated for review. The after-party lounge, suspended. The raw bar, suspended." Each answer peeled another layer off the wedding Brianna had bragged about online for 3 months. Not the marriage, not the ceremony, just the luxuries she had tried to steal and call love. My father stepped toward me, lowering his voice like that would make his words private. "Emma, listen to me. If you embarrass your sister tonight, people will remember it forever." I looked toward the Magnolia Room, where guests were still drinking from glasses covered by the package I had actually paid for. "They already will," I said. "She thanked you and Mom for my money while I was serving champagne in an apron." He flinched, but only because someone else heard it. That was my father's shame. Not what happened, but who witnessed it. He said, "You are being vindictive." I said, "No, I am being accurate." Patricia stepped into the room then, her voice controlled but cold. "Robert, Linda, I think Carter and I need a clear answer. Did you represent to our family that you were hosting this weekend?" My mother's mouth tightened. "We are the bride's parents." Patricia did not move. "That is not an answer." Carter looked at Brianna. "Did you know Emma was supposed to have a seat?" Brianna wiped her face. "There were limited places. She paid for the room. She said she did not care about attention. Did she say she wanted a vendor meal?" Brianna's silence answered for her. I felt the room turning, slowly but unmistakably. Not fully toward me. Not yet. People rarely give up the version they were sold all at once, but the first cracks were visible. Marcy placed the printed packet into a cream Fairmont House folder and handed it to me. "I recommend you keep this copy." My mother reached for it. "I should see that." I moved it out of her reach. No. One word. No explanation. No apology. Her hand stayed in the air for a humiliating second before she lowered it. That was the first time in my adult life I had denied her access to something she believed belonged to her, simply because it came from me. Then Brianna made the mistake I had been waiting for. She stopped crying and pointed at me. "Fine," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "You want to be treated like the client? Then act like one and pay the balance. Because if my wedding falls apart tomorrow, I will tell everyone exactly what kind of sister you are." My mother whispered, "Brianna, stop." But it was too late. Brianna kept going. "You think a contract makes you powerful? You only have that money because you never had a real life. No husband, no kids, no one choosing you. So you buy your way into being needed." Carter looked like she had slapped him. Patricia inhaled sharply. My father stared at the wall. And I realized Brianna had finally said out loud what my family had believed for years. I picked up the folder, slid it into my purse, and looked at Marcy. "No additional charges. No exceptions. And please send me every approval connected to that fake domain." Marcy nodded. Brianna laughed bitterly. "Go ahead. Build your little case. Tomorrow, I'm still the bride." I turned at the doorway. "Yes," I said. "And tomorrow, you can have the wedding you can afford." Her face changed then, because she understood exactly what that meant. The ballroom, the food, the ceremony, the music, the photographer, all the things I had honestly approved would remain. No. I took the empty seat at the far end of table 3. Not the kitchen, not the vendor corner, not the family table either. Just a chair nobody had assigned me because nobody had expected me to claim space. A server approached and quietly placed a dinner plate in front of me. It was Matteo from earlier. He did not say anything about the apron. He simply set down the plate, then leaned closer and murmured, "Ms. Whitaker?" Marcy said, "Anything you need goes through me tonight." Ms. Whitaker. Not Emma, not staff, not useful. I thanked him, and for the first time all evening, someone served me food I had paid for. Across the room, Brianna was performing recovery. She sat close to Carter, touching his sleeve, whispering urgently while he stared at his untouched plate. My mother kept smiling at Patricia with the desperate cheer of a woman trying to hold a cracked vase together with both hands. My father gave a short toast about love, patience, and not letting small misunderstandings distract from what really matters. I almost admired the efficiency. A forged signature had become a small misunderstanding in under 15 minutes. That was how my family survived consequences. They renamed them before anyone could study the shape. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not Denise. It was an email chain forwarded from Marcy with the subject line, "Vendor Approval History." I opened it under the edge of the table. 12 fake approvals, just like security said. The earliest was 6 weeks ago, approving upgraded linens. Then came premium bridal makeup access, a luxury welcome basket, extra valet hours, custom napkins, a private family brunch, a floral revision, a raw bar, and the after-party lounge. But the last 2 made my stomach tighten. One was not from Fairmont House. It was from a boutique hotel next door, confirming a 2-night honeymoon suite under my business billing profile. The other was from a spa, confirming a bridal party package charged to a card ending in 4421. I knew that card. It was an old business card I had stopped using months ago. Or I thought I had. I left the room before dessert. This time, no one stopped me. In the quiet vestibule near the front entrance, I called my bank's business card line and verified the last 4 digits. The representative asked me to confirm recent charges: $3,850 at Peachtree Bridal Spa, $1,240 at a luxury shoe boutique, $980 at a wine shop, $2,600 pending at the hotel, all placed in the last 10 days, all connected to the card I had cut up after paying off the balance. Was a replacement card mailed? I asked. The representative paused. Yes, ma'am. 3 weeks ago, to the mailing address on file. My mailing address had not changed, but my parents still had access to the mailbox at my old apartment building because my father once insisted on keeping a spare key for emergencies. Suddenly, the wedding was no longer just about a fake email. I froze the card, disputed the charges, and asked the representative to email the fraud packet to my attorney. Then I stood in the vestibule with the phone still warm in my hand, looking through the glass doors at the courtyard lights. For years, my family had treated my boundaries like locked doors they could open with old keys. They had passwords from when I trusted them, addresses from when I needed them, emergency contacts from when I still believed emergency meant help. They did not think of access as temporary. They thought once they had been allowed near something, it belonged to them forever. Denise called before I could call her. Emma, she said, without hello. I reviewed the addendum and the domain issue. Do not accuse anyone publicly tonight. Do not threaten criminal charges. Do not negotiate reimbursement verbally. Keep everything in writing. Her voice was calm, clean, and exactly what I needed. I told her about the business card charges. She went quiet for one beat. Freeze everything connected to that account. Email me the bank fraud packet as soon as it arrives. And Emma, listen carefully. This is now bigger than wedding overspending. If someone requested a replacement card, used the fake business email, and signed your name, they may have exposed themselves to identity misuse and business fraud. Let the documents do the talking. When I returned to the Magnolia Room, my mother was waiting near the bar. Her eyes were bright, which meant she had either been crying or wanted me to think she had. We need to talk, she whispered. Not here, I said. She grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to remind me she still believed my body was part of the family property. I looked down at her hand until she let go. Emma, please. Your sister is falling apart. Carter's mother is asking questions. You have made your point. No, I said. The documents made the point. Her face hardened. You always were cold. There it was. The old punishment for not bleeding on command. My father joined us, blocking the view from the room with his shoulders. Your mother and I will cover the disputed upgrades later, he said. Let tomorrow happen. After the honeymoon, we'll sit down like adults. I asked, with what money? He blinked. Excuse me? You told me your bonus was delayed. Mom told Carter's family you were hosting. Brianna approved almost $16,000 in upgrades. Now you're telling me you'll cover it later? With what money? My mother hissed. Do not talk to your father that way. I looked at him. He did not answer. That silence told me what I already suspected. They had never planned to cover anything. They planned to pressure me until the wedding passed, then bury me under guilt until the debt felt easier than the argument. Then my mother made her second mistake. She leaned closer and whispered, "If you woo-in tomorrow, I will tell everyone you offered to pay and then tried to destroy your sister out of jealousy. I will tell them you begged to be involved because you have no wedding of your own." She said it softly, but my phone was still in my hand, and Denise's advice was still fresh in my ear. I did not record her. I did not need to. Carter stood 6 feet behind her holding 2 glasses of water, and he heard every word. "Linda," he said. My mother turned so fast she almost stumbled. Carter looked at her with a disgust I do not think she had ever imagined receiving from him. "Is that what you were going to tell my family?" My father stepped in. "Carter, this is a private misunderstanding." Carter shook his head. "No, a private misunderstanding is a seating mistake. This is my fiancé's family hiding the person paying for the wedding in the kitchen." My mother's mouth opened, but Patricia appeared beside Carter before she could speak. "And possibly charging expenses without authorization," Patricia added. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. She had the kind of calm that makes liars feel overdressed. Brianna saw the cluster forming and rushed over. "Why is everyone ganging up on me?" she demanded. Her mascara had smudged just enough to make her look wounded if someone did not know better. "Emma is doing this on purpose. She has always hated when I get attention." I said nothing. Carter looked at her. "Did you use her business card for the spa?" Brianna's face changed by half an inch. "Just half an inch, but enough." "Mom said it was covered," my mother whispered Brianna. "Too late again." Patricia closed her eyes briefly, as if adding that to a list she wished did not exist. My father stared at my mother. For the first time all night, he looked less like a man managing embarrassment and more like a man realizing the bill had his name somewhere on it. I took one step back from them. Here is what happens now. The original wedding package remains. Anything I approved in writing remains. Anything tied to fake emails, fake signatures, or unauthorized card charges stops. I am not discussing reimbursement at a bar, in a hallway, or under emotional pressure. If anyone contacts vendors using my name again, Marcy and my attorney will receive it immediately. Brianna laughed through tears. "So you're punishing me?" "No," I said. "I am no longer financing your lies." I took one step back from them. Here is what happens now. The original wedding package remains. Anything I approved in writing remains. Anything tied to fake emails, fake signatures, or unauthorized card charges stops. I am not discussing reimbursement at a bar, in a hallway, or under emotional pressure. If anyone contacts vendors using my name again, Marcy and my attorney will receive it immediately. Brianna laughed through tears. "So you're punishing me?" "No," I said. "I am no longer financing your lies." I scanned every page Marcy gave me and uploaded the files to a secure folder Denise had created. Then I forwarded the bank fraud packet, the fake domain emails, the addendum, and the revised service plan. Denise replied within 10 minutes, even though it was late. "Good. Do not meet them alone. Tomorrow. Do not sign anything unless I review it first. If they pressure you publicly, ask for all requests in writing." That sentence almost made me laugh. My family hated writing things down unless they thought the paper benefited them. Their whole power depended on hallway whispers, guilt, and later denial. Tomorrow, if they wanted my money, they would have to ask for it in a room full of witnesses. I slept for 4 hours and woke to 23 missed calls. 7 from my mother, 5 from Brianna, 2 from Aunt Carol, which meant the family phone tree had already been activated. The first voicemail was my mother crying. "Emma, I don't know how things got so ugly, but your sister has not slept. Please don't do this to her." The second was my father, colder. "You need to think very carefully about the damage you're causing." The third was Brianna. No tears this time. "If you don't fix the champagne wall and the flowers before noon, I swear I will tell Carter exactly why you're doing this." I stared at the phone. Exactly why? She still believed there was some shame in me she could expose that would be worse than her own conduct. At 8:12, Marcy sent the final revised plan. The ceremony, dinner, standard floral, photographer, music, and basic bar remained. Everything I had honestly approved was intact. The raw bar was removed. The champagne wall was removed. The premium suite was returned to the standard bridal suite. The after-party lounge was canceled. The private brunch was suspended, pending authorization. In other words, Brianna still had a beautiful wedding most people would be grateful for. She just no longer had the luxury fantasy she tried to buy with my forged name. That was the part I knew she would never forgive. Not because I ruined her wedding, but because I exposed that she could not afford the version she had been selling. I arrived at Fairmont House at 10:30 in a navy dress and low heels, with Denise on speaker in my car until I pulled into the lot. "Remember," she said, "you are not there to punish. You are there to enforce the existing contract. Calm is your advantage." I looked at the white brick building, the gas lanterns, the valet stand, the florist van parked near the side entrance. What if they try to corner me? Then you say, "Put it in writing." If they keep going, you leave and call me. I took a breath. "And if they try to use the wedding guests?" Denise paused. "Then let them. People who choose a public stage often forget it has an audience." Inside, the venue had the strange, peaceful energy of a disaster temporarily organized by professionals. Staff moved quickly. Flowers were being adjusted. Chairs lined the courtyard in perfect rows. Nothing looked ruined. Nothing looked cruel. That was the thing about boundaries. People who benefited from your lack of them called the boundary destruction, even when everything good remained standing. Marcy met me near the foyer with a tablet and a calm nod. "Only authorized package items are active. I've briefed department leads. No changes without your direct confirmation." I thanked her. She lowered her voice. "Your mother has already asked 3 staff members whether the champagne wall can be restored as a surprise." I said, "Of course she has." Brianna found me 10 minutes later in the bridal corridor. She was fully dressed now. Hair pinned, makeup perfect, veil clipped into place. She looked beautiful, and for a second that made the whole thing sadder. She could have walked into a lovely wedding, married a man who still seemed decent, and let the day be enough. Instead, the first words out of her mouth were, "You need to fix this before people notice." I looked at her veil, then at her face. "Good morning to you, too." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not be smug. The raw bar is gone. The champagne display is gone. And Carter's mother is asking why the suite changed." "Do you want me humiliated?" I said. "You assigned me to the kitchen at the wedding I paid for. Let's not pretend humiliation bothers you on principle." She flinched, then recovered. I was stressed. You forged my signature. I copied it because you were being impossible. There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Just the family translation of theft into inconvenience. I did not raise my voice. Say that again in front of Marcy. Brianna looked away. You're enjoying this. No, I said. I'm done financing it. Her face twisted. You think this makes you better than me? You're almost 30, Emma. You have no husband, no children, no real family of your own. All you have is money and paperwork. I felt the words land, but they did not cut as deeply as she expected. Maybe because I had heard them before. Maybe because this time, money and paperwork were exactly what stood between me and being used again. Photographers. My mother rushed up before Brianna could continue, holding a cream folder I did not recognize. My father followed behind her, pale and tense. Emma, Mom said, too sweetly, we are not doing this today. We have prepared a simple agreement. She opened the folder and held out a single page. You sign this, the wedding continues as planned, and afterward we will all sit down privately. I did not touch it. Email it to Denise? My father's jaw tightened. This does not need a lawyer. Then it should survive one reading it. My mother's smile vanished. You are making this impossible. I looked at the page from a distance and saw the words, Family Reimbursement Understanding, Voluntary Assumption of Balance, No Further Dispute. They had not slept because they were ashamed. They had stayed up drafting a trap. Carter appeared at the end of the corridor with Patricia beside him. He looked at the paper in my mother's hand. What is that, Brianna? Said quickly. Nothing. Emma is just being dramatic again. Patricia walked closer. If it is nothing, read it aloud. My mother clutched the folder to her chest. My father said, Patricia, with respect, this is between our daughters. Patricia's expression hardened. My son is marrying into whatever this is in less than 2 hours. I think we are past pretending it does not concern us. Carter looked at me, then at Brianna. Were you asking Emma to sign something? Brianna's silence stretched too long. I said, They want me to assume the disputed balance and waive further claims. Brianna snapped. Because you said you would pay! For the original package, I said. Not for forged addendums, fake emails, or unauthorized card charges. Carter closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he looked exhausted. Unauthorized card charges, my mother whispered. Emma. That whisper was not a warning. It was a plea to keep protecting them. I did not. The spa, the hotel suite, the shoes, and the wine shop were charged to a replacement business card I did not request. Patricia turned to Brianna. Tell me you did not use her card. Brianna's lips trembled. Mom said, Emma always makes a fuss first and pays later. For the first time, my father turned on my mother. Linda, what did you do? My mother's face went gray. Brianna began crying again, but no one moved toward her. The corridor filled with the quiet sounds of a wedding continuing nearby, chairs being moved, music being tested, someone laughing in the courtyard. Life going on, indifferent to the collapse of a lie. Marcy arrived then, followed by the venue manager, a tall man named Paul Everett, carrying another folder. Emma, Marcy said, we have one more issue before ceremony start. Paul looked at my parents, then at Brianna. Someone attempted to authorize the restored upgrades from the business center computer 20 minutes ago using the fake email login. Our security team captured the session. Brianna stopped crying. My mother closed her eyes. Carter stepped back from his bride like he needed air. Paul held out the folder to me. We need your instruction as client of record. Do you want us to proceed under the original approved package, or suspend the event pending investigation? Every face turned to me. My mother whispered, Emma, please. Brianna whispered, don't. My father said nothing at all. I looked toward the courtyard, where guests were beginning to arrive for a wedding my family had almost turned into a crime scene. Then I looked at Paul and said, proceed with the original package, but lock every account. No one changes another thing. The ceremony went forward because I let it go forward, and that was the part my family hated most. They could not call me cruel when the chairs were still filled, the flowers were still arranged, the music still played, and Brianna still walked down the aisle in the dress I had helped pay for. They could not point to an empty courtyard and say I had destroyed her day. All they had was the truth. I had removed the stolen parts and left her with the wedding she actually had permission to have. Watching that realization settle over my mother's face was almost painful. She had built her whole strategy around making me choose between silence and looking heartless. I chose a third option. I let the beautiful parts remain and locked the doors around the lies. I sat in the third row beside Aunt Carol, who kept glancing at me like she wanted to ask questions, but was afraid the answers would cost her something. My parents sat in the front row, stiff as church statues. Brianna looked perfect from a distance. Her veil moved gently in the courtyard breeze. Carter stood waiting beneath the floral arch, and for a moment the guests saw only the wedding they came to see. But I saw Carter's jaw tighten when Brianna reached him. I saw Patricia watching her future daughter-in-law with the face of a woman revising a family tree in real time. I saw my mother wiping away tears that were not entirely sentimental. The ceremony was not ruined. That was the cruelest consequence for them. The wedding survived without the fraud. During the vows, my phone stayed silent in my purse. Denise had warned me not to communicate unless necessary, and Marcy had locked down every account. No fake email could add another candle, another shrimp tower, another private suite, another charge in my name. The original package carried the day exactly as written. Standard bar, approved dinner, approved floral, approved photography. No champagne wall, no raw bar, no after-party lounge, no private brunch, no luxury hotel suite under my business card. Brianna had wanted everyone to see abundance. Instead, anyone who knew what was missing saw the outline of entitlement. After the ceremony, guests moved into cocktail hour. The room looked elegant, just not excessive. Brianna noticed immediately. "Where are the past oysters?" she hissed at Marcy near the entrance. Carter was standing close enough to hear. Marcy answered with professional calm. The raw bar extension was not authorized by the client of record. Brianna's smile froze because 3 guests were watching. "Can we not say that phrase today?" she whispered. Marcy said, "Of course. I can say it is not part of the active service plan." Carter looked away. That was when I understood something important. Carter might still marry her, but he would never again hear her version of a story without checking the paperwork. The reception began at 5. My father gave a toast that sounded like it had been edited in panic. He spoke about love, family, patience, and the grace to overlook imperfection. He did not mention money. He did not mention sacrifice. He did not mention his first daughter. My mother sat beside him with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles looked white. When he said, "Linda and I are so proud to welcome Carter into our family," Patricia's expression did not change, but she did not raise her glass. Small things can be louder than shouting if the right people see them. Then Brianna took the microphone. I knew before she spoke that she was going to make another mistake. Humiliation had always made her reckless. She could tolerate getting caught only if she could turn the room against whoever caught her. "I just want to say," she began, her voice bright and trembling, "that weddings are stressful, and sometimes people you love forget what the day is really about." My mother's head snapped up. Carter's hand tightened around his water glass. Brianna continued, looking directly at me now. "But I choose joy. I choose love. I choose not to let bitterness or jealousy take anything away from this moment." There it was. Not an apology. Not restraint. A public smear wrapped in bridal lace. A few guests made sympathetic noises because they did not know the full story. Aunt Carol whispered, "Oh, honey." But I was not sure whether she meant Brianna or me. I did not move. I did not reach for the microphone. I did not defend myself in a room that had not yet earned the truth. I simply looked at Marcy, who stood near the service entrance with Paul Everett beside her. Marcy understood the question in my eyes. If Brianna was going to use the reception to suggest I had tried to hurt her, then the contract packet no longer belonged in private. And Brianna lifted her glass. "To family," she said. "Even when family makes things harder than they have to be." That was when Patricia stood. She did not rush. She did not look angry. She looked like a woman who had chaired enough charity boards to know how to correct a meeting without raising her voice. "Before we toast," she said, "I think Carter and I need clarity. Brianna, are you referring to Emma?" The room went quiet. Brianna blinked. "Patricia, this is not the time." Patricia smiled politely. "You made it the time when you raised it in front of the guests." My mother stood halfway under Wang. "Patricia, please. This is a misunderstanding between sisters." Paul Everett stepped forward then, holding the cream folder. "Mrs. Mother Whitaker, with respect, Fairmont House has an obligation to clarify any public statement that may misrepresent the status of its client or event contract." My father whispered, "Oh, God." Brianna looked suddenly small beneath the chandeliers. Carter stood beside her but did not touch her. Patricia said, "Paul, please explain only what is necessary." Paul opened the folder. The active wedding package was approved and paid through Whitaker Event Solutions, LLC. The authorized signer and client of record is Emma Claire Whitaker. Several requested upgrades were suspended because they were submitted through an unverified email domain and a disputed signature. The silence that followed was the kind people remember for years. Not because it was loud, but because everyone in the room knew they were hearing the end of a lie. One of Carter's cousins looked at the bar, then at the flowers, then at me. A bridesmaid covered her mouth. Aunt Carol said, barely above a whisper, "Emma paid for this." My mother sat down slowly. My father stared at his plate. Brianna tried to laugh. This is ridiculous. Nobody cares about vendor paperwork at a wedding. Carter finally spoke. I care. 2 words, flat and devastated. Brianna turned to him. Carter, don't do this. He looked at her like he had been doing math all day and hated the answer. Did you know Emma was being seated with vendors? Brianna said nothing. Did you use the fake email? Silence. Did you sign her name? My mother whispered. Carter, please. He looked at her. Did you help her? My father pushed back his chair. Enough. But it was not enough anymore. Enough was the word my family used when the truth reached them. It had never stopped the truth itself. Paul placed one page on the nearest table, careful not to show private financial details to the whole room. The venue is not making accusations beyond documented contract irregularities. But we have preserved the records and restricted account access at the client's request. Marcy added. No guest services included in the original approved package were removed. That sentence mattered. It killed Brianna's victim story before it could crawl across the room. Nothing essential had been taken from her. Only the unauthorized luxury had disappeared. Brianna's face twisted. Emma wanted this, she said. She wanted to embarrass me. I stood then, not because I wanted attention, but because I was done letting other people narrate my restraint as cruelty. I did not take the microphone. I did not need it. I paid for the wedding package. I approved because I loved my sister, I said. I stopped paying when my name was used without permission. That is all. My voice did not shake. That surprised me more than anyone. Enjoy the dinner. It is paid for. Then I sat down. No speech. No performance. No family history poured onto the floor for strangers to step over. Just the fact. Clean and impossible to decorate. Patricia looked at me with something like respect. Aunt Carol started crying quietly. Sterile turned away from Brianna and walked out through the side doors into the courtyard. Brianna stared after him, then at my mother, then at me. And for the first time in my life, she looked less angry than afraid. Not because she had lost a raw bar or a sweet or a champagne wall, because the people she needed most had finally seen the machinery behind her tears. 10 minutes later, while the main course was being served, Denise texted me. Bank, confirmed replacement card was requested from your parents' IP address. Do not leave venue alone. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. Across the room, my father was staring at his phone, and my mother's hands were shaking beneath the tablecloth. The forged wedding addendum had cracked the story. The bank record was about to break the family. The text from Denise sat on my screen while the dinner plates moved through the room like nothing had changed. Bank confirmed replacement card was requested from your parents' IP address. Do not leave venue alone. I read it twice, then turned the phone face down on the table. Across the room, my mother was whispering to my father with her napkin clenched in one hand. Brianna was at the sweetheart table, staring at the side doors where Carter had disappeared. The room still looked like a wedding reception, but the center had collapsed. People were eating carefully, speaking softly, pretending not to watch the family at the front table come apart, one truth at a time. Carter returned after nearly 15 minutes, but he did not sit beside Brianna. He walked to his mother first. Patricia touched his arm, and they spoke in low voices near the courtyard doors. Brianna saw it, and stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Carter," she said, forcing a smile that looked painful from across the room. "We need to do our first dance." Carter looked at her for a long second. "We need to talk first." That sentence moved through the reception faster than music. Brianna laughed like he had made a joke. "Not now, everyone is waiting," he said. "That did not bother you when you made a speech about Emma?" My mother stood. "Carter, please. Weddings are emotional. Brianna is overwhelmed." Patricia turned toward her. "Linda, stop speaking for everyone." It was not loud, but it landed with the weight of a gavel. My mother sat back down as if her knees had failed. My father looked at Patricia with offended disbelief, the way he looked at women who forgot to be manageable. But he did not argue. Not now. Not with Paul Everett near the wall, Marcy by the service entrance, and half the room finally understanding that my family's confidence had been borrowed. I stepped into the foyer to call Denise. Marcy came with me without being asked. That was another quiet kindness from someone who understood events and danger better than most people. Denise answered on the first ring. "Do not confront them alone," she said. "The bank has enough to keep the account frozen, but I want a written statement from you tonight. Also, Fairmont House Security should preserve the business center footage." Marcy nodded before I repeated it. "Already flagged," she said. "The attempted login was from a guest account created under Linda Whitaker's name." I closed my eyes for 1 second, not because I was surprised, because a part of me had still wanted one line they had not crossed. When I returned to the reception, my father was waiting near the hallway with the cream folder my mother had tried to make me sign earlier. His face looked older than it had that morning. "Emma," he said, "we need to end this before it ruins your sister's marriage." I almost corrected him. They had ruined something, but it was not mine to name. He held out the folder. "Your mother panicked. Brianna panicked. The card was a mistake. We can fix this as a family." I looked at the paper, then at him. "Did you know Mom requested the replacement card?" His jaw moved once. "That is not a simple question. It is." He looked away. There was my answer. Behind him, my mother appeared, eyes wet and furious. "I did everything for this family," she whispered. "You think you're the only one who sacrificed? Your father and I gave you a roof, food, clothes. And I repaid you by funding your daughter's wedding?" I said. "Then you used my business card." Her mouth tightened. "You always make things sound criminal," I said. "No, Mom. You made them criminal." For the first time, she had no sentence ready. No guilt, no tears, no family speech polished enough to cover the word criminal once it was standing between us. Brianna came toward us then, still in her gown, still beautiful, but with her face stripped of performance. "Carter is talking about postponing the reception announcement," she said to my mother, not to me. "Do something." I realized she did not mean apologize. She did not mean explain. She meant control him, control me, control the room. My mother looked at me with open desperation. "Emma, tell him this is not what it looks like." I almost laughed. After all of it, they still thought my purpose was translation. Turn fraud into stress. Turn theft into family. Turn humiliation into misunderstanding. Turn their choices into my responsibility. No, I said. Brianna stared at me. No, no! I will not lie for you! Her face crumpled, but anger came through before tears could finish the job. You're going to destroy my life over a stupid card and some flowers? No, I said again. I am going to stop protecting you from the consequences of forging my name, using my business, and treating me like a servant at an event I paid for. My father hissed, "Lower your voice." I looked at him. Why? Guests might hear the truth before you can rename it. That was when Carter stepped into the hallway. He had heard enough. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Brianna, I'm not making any announcement tonight. Brianna froze. What does that mean? It means I need time. My family needs time. And you need to explain why your sister's name is on a forged addendum, why your mother had access to her business card, and why no one told me Emma was paying for the wedding. Brianna reached for his hand, but he stepped back. It was not dramatic. It was worse. It was final enough for the hallway to feel colder. My mother turned on me then, all softness gone. Are you happy now? She said. You finally got what you wanted. You couldn't stand seeing your sister loved. I looked at Brianna, who had spent the whole weekend surrounded by flowers, guests, music, and a man willing to marry her until the truth became too large to ignore. Then I looked back at my mother. Love was never the problem. Theft was. Patricia entered the hallway just as I said it. She looked at my mother, then at my father, then at Brianna. Carter and I are leaving after dinner. Our family will not participate in any further announcements tonight. Paul has arranged for our side's transportation. Brianna began to cry again, but no one rushed to fix it. Not Carter, not Patricia, not even my father, who seemed too busy calculating which part of the collapse could still be blamed on me. My mother whispered, "This is cruel." Patricia answered before I could. "No, Linda." Cruel was letting Emma serve champagne while thanking yourselves for her money. The hallway went silent. I had spent years trying to explain my family to people who only saw the polished version. Patricia understood in one evening because my mother had finally performed the cruelty in public. The rest of the reception did not explode. That would have been easier for them. There was no screaming scene, no shattered glass, no dramatic arrest beneath the chandeliers. The truth simply settled over the room and made pretending exhausting. Carter's family left shortly after dinner. Carter left with them. Brianna stayed in her gown at the sweetheart table, while my mother whispered into her ear, and my father avoided looking at anyone. The first dance never happened. The bouquet toss never happened. The after-party lounge they had tried to steal never existed. Guests drifted out early, carrying quiet versions of the story my family could no longer fully control. At 9:40 p.m., I signed one document, and only one. It was not my mother's reimbursement agreement. It was Fairmont House's revised final acknowledgement, confirming that the original package had been delivered. Disputed upgrades remained suspended, and no further charges could be placed under Whitaker Event Solutions, LLC, without direct authorization from me. Paul signed as venue manager. Marcy signed as witness. I took a copy, sent it to Denise, and closed the folder. My mother watched from across the lobby. her face bitter with the shock of someone who had mistaken my patience for permanent access. The legal process took months, not minutes. The bank reversed the unauthorized card charges after reviewing the replacement request, IP records, and delivery trail. Denise sent a formal demand letter for the disputed expenses and business identity misuse. Fairmont House preserved the fake email logs and business center footage. My parents eventually repaid part of the unauthorized charges through a settlement they hated signing because, for once, the paper did not flatter them. Brianna and Carter did not stay married. Whether they annulled it or quietly ended it through lawyers was never my business. What mattered to me was simpler. No vendor, bank, hotel, or family member could use my name again without permission. My family tried every door afterward. My mother called from unknown numbers. My father sent one email with the subject line, "Family Healing," then spent 4 paragraphs explaining how public embarrassment had affected his blood pressure. Brianna left a voicemail saying, "You got what you wanted," and then another, 3 weeks later, asking whether I could at least help her recover the hotel deposit because you understand contracts. I did not answer. That silence was different from the old silence. The old silence was survival. This silence was a locked gate. 6 months later, I opened my own small event studio in Decatur. Nothing huge, nothing flashy, just a brick storefront with warm lights, a consultation table, framed contracts, and a policy that no client could approve charges from an unverified email. Marcy sent flowers on opening day. Patricia sent a handwritten note that said, "Grace is not the same as permission." I kept that note in my desk drawer, not because I needed validation from Carter's family, but because sometimes a stranger sees the truth clearly enough to give you language for it. On the first Saturday after the studio opened, I hosted a retirement dinner for a woman turning 70, surrounded by daughters who actually listened when she spoke. Near the end of the night, her youngest daughter hugged me and said, "Thank you for making Mom feel seen." I went back to my office after they left and sat there in the quiet, thinking about a black apron folded on a silver prep table and the question that had saved me from one more year of being useful instead of valued. Why is the person who owns this contract serving food in the hallway? The answer was simple. Because I had let people confuse my love with access. I had let them treat my competence like an unpaid family resource. I had believed that if I gave enough, paid enough, fixed enough, one day they would finally see me. But some people do not see you more clearly when you sacrifice. They simply learn how much they can take before you stop them. That wedding did not teach me revenge. It taught me ownership of my name, my work, my money, my peace. If your family only calls you family when there is a bill to pay, that is not love. If they need your silence to protect their image, that is not loyalty. And if they mistake your kindness for permission, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is fold the apron, place it on the table, and let the contract speak. The answer was simple. Because I had let people confuse my love with access. I had let them treat my competence like an unpaid family resource. I had believed that if I gave enough, paid enough, fixed enough, one day they would finally see me. But some people do not see you more clearly when you sacrifice. They simply learn how much they can take before you stop them. That wedding did not teach me revenge. It taught me ownership.
of my name, my work, my money, my peace.
If your family only calls you family when there is a bill to pay, that is not love. If they need your silence to protect their image, that is not loyalty. And if they mistake your kindness for permission, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is fold the apron, place it on the table, and let the contract speak.